Tradition, courage, self-control, loyalty, integrity, honor. The modern male mind is often fascinated by warrior castes of ages past, with samurai among the most prominent of such groups. And those traits I just listed are in large part responsible for the thousands upon thousands of katanas and kabuto listed for sale on Etsy. Of course, this is also due to our tendency to have a highly romanticized view of the past. Samurai were, after all, men in positions of authority, and people in power have a pretty good track record when it comes to abusing that power and using their strength for their own selfish ends. To think that the samurai as a group were an exception to that rule would be foolish. The famous bushido was not an unchanging doctrine that every samurai adhered to on the pain of a dishonorable death. It adapted, it evolved, it at times allowed samurai to kill those beneath them for the slightest offense without fear of repercussion. And no doubt even its most morally just dictates were not followed exactingly by every samurai ever. However, just because these samurai were not a perfectly honorable class of warriors who never committed any injustices does not mean that we cannot look to them, to their life and their code, and admire what was and is good and true about what they believed and how they lived, fought, and died. Now, the samurai code as presented in Ghost of Tsushima is an incredibly simplified version of bushido, which wasn't even formalized until centuries after the game is set anyway, but it's worth examining, so let us start there at the samurai tradition.
Tradition, courage, honor, they are what make us. We are the warriors of Tsushima. We are samurai!
If you've played the game, it should be absolutely no surprise to you that Lord Shimura lists tradition first. Can you blame him, though? Tradition is, at its simplest form, doing things the way we have been taught to do them, the way they have been done for generations. Everyone has traditions they follow, from Christmas trees to fireworks on the 4th of July, to that squash and rhubarb dish that your aunt always makes for Thanksgiving but no one ever eats, but she can't stop making it because her mother made it, and her grandmother made it, and dang it, the tradition's not gonna die with her. I would guess that we never even bother to question most traditions which we observe, and if we did, we'd find that the reasoning behind them is quite banal and ordinary, like squash and rhubarb being the only things that great-grandma Gertrude could get to grow in her garden during the Great Depression. But when it does come time to challenge tradition, such an examination of its origin and reasoning is of utmost importance. In the case of our story, the tradition is that of the samurai code, their method of dispatching justice, that is to say, death, openly and honestly, not striking from the shadows, but facing their enemy head on.
Before the samurai, this island was ruled by criminals. We changed that by creating order and delivering justice in the open. We live by a code of honor, and sometimes we die by it.
When chaos, unruliness, and backstabbing were the law of the land, of course the samurai enforced their complete opposites as right and necessary. Doing so showed the island's people that the samurai stood in stark contrast to the barbarous, deceitful rabble that previously held sway over Tsushima, and thus that they were good for the island. And this method worked, so it became law, I think. It's not actually clear initially how much of the samurai code is actually codified. It seems at first more like an unwritten rule, but certain events that transpire near the end of the game make me think that face your enemy head on is in fact the law of the land. Anyway, the problem with course corrections is that they're often not meant to last forever. Just like if you're driving and you find yourself drifting into the left lane and turn the wheel back to the right, you do at some point need to find the middle ground once again. Rigid structure certainly was necessary when it needed to stand in opposition to chaos, but now, not so much. Our introduction to this conflict in the character journey of Jin Sakai comes after he is rescued by a peasant woman/thief, and the two are attempting to recover his sword and get out of town as the Mongols take over the village in which they found themselves.
We can get close, slit their throats, and kill them without a sound.
Without honor, I will not break my code.
That sentiment that Jin expresses is no doubt part of what makes the samurai, or at least a somewhat romanticized version of them, so appealing to the modern man. We live in a world of opaque and manipulative algorithms, targeted marketing created from our personal conversations, and terms and conditions statements that aren't even comprehensible to the lawyers who put them together. We are constantly being subtly molded and prompted without our knowledge by dozens of unknown sources, all competing for our time, attention, and money. It's all decidedly underhanded, sneaky, invasive, dishonorable, and, dare I say, fake. But this, stepping out into the open, declaring yourself to your enemy, laying your cards face up on the table, saying, "Try me if you dare," pitting steel against steel and skill against skill, that's real. It's pure. Anybody could catch a lucky break and find himself with his opponent's back turned. It takes a real man to actually best his enemy in a fair fight. I say that somewhat facetiously, as combat prowess is hardly the true measure of a man, but for 12th century members of a warrior caste, yeah, of course your skill with a katana was of utmost importance. The samurai had to be better than everyone else. Even if they allowed more underhanded tactics, i.e. stealth, at some point they would be forced to rely on their own ability. Believe me, I know. No matter how many times I went into Mongol territory fully intent on taking them down all quietly, it always ended with a clash of blades. The practical problem, of course, emerged when stepping out into the open and shouting, "I'm here!"
Face me, invader!
Proved to be insufficient or even downright stupid. When Jin and Yuna are contemplating their strategy for rescuing her captured brother, their clash of codes reemerges.
If something goes wrong, they'll kill the prisoners. I've seen them do it. We have to go in quietly.
Like thieves.
What's wrong with that?
I promised my uncle I'd never break our code.
Then bend it. To save my family. And what's left of yours.
We can admire Jin's desire to stick to his code. All men, I hope, believe in something bigger and more important than their own desires and whims. They seek a noble cause to which they can give themselves fully and totally. Which begs the question, is the way of the samurai worthy of such devotion? Now, I'm a pretty traditional guy. I enjoy the reject modernity, embrace tradition meme almost every time I see it pop up. But I'll also be quick to tell you that just because something is old, it doesn't mean it's better. Conversely, just because something is old does not mean it's bad or outdated, which is a term that gets applied far too broadly. Technology and ways of doing things can be outdated, but not beliefs about what is good and what is evil. Those are either true or false. The time period is irrelevant. But to cling tightly to tradition just because it was handed down to us is, as G.K. Chesterton puts it, giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. It's worth noting that Chesterton was a Roman Catholic, a member of an organization absolutely steeped in history and tradition, and he's hardly the only Catholic to proclaim that tradition, small t tradition to be clear, is not necessarily of value just because it was. St. John Henry Newman wrote extensively about how traditions could become mere formalisms, things that are done simply because they have always been done. A tradition corrupts as soon as it loses its hold on truth. Traditions, he argued, should develop and evolve as long as they remain rooted in the truths that prompted their original creation. With that in mind, let us ask more focused questions. Are the values inherent within the samurai code timeless ones? Do they still ring true just as much now as they did back when the code was written? Does the principle of the tradition matter more than the people it was established to serve? For Jin Sakai, the answer is clearly no. When the choice was a binary one, act against his code or lose his uncle, he chose the former. Even then, it wasn't an easy choice. After all, his uncle, acting in place of Jin's deceased father, was the one who taught him the importance of their code.
And look him in the eye. And teach him that samurai never acts out of anger or fear. And take his life with honor.
Just in those two sentences, we can hear the value, the timeless good that does exist in the ways to which Shimura clings so tightly. Of course, one shouldn't be moved to violence by base emotions, and a samurai, a man charged with caring for and protecting the island's people, a man given power to choose between life and death, is called to master his emotions and control his response to them with rigor and discipline. However, Shimura believes in a false equivalency. Because the samurai needed to set an example, needed to stand in stark contrast to the emotionally charged, backstabbing rabble that once dominated Tsushima, they have come to believe that proper emotional regulation, which is a timeless good, can only be displayed through their narrow and restrictive rules of engagement. The challenge that Jin faces then is how to live up to what is and always will be true about the code he has followed all his life while letting go of the rest of it, the parts that were only necessary at a given point in time. Ultimately, he does choose to relinquish his strict adherence to the way, and, well, it doesn't go super smoothly at first. In story-driven video games, there exists a phenomenon called ludonarrative dissonance, which is a fancy way of saying that the story and the gameplay don't mesh well together at certain points. Like when someone tells you you have to double time it to the next town over before it gets completely leveled by a dragon, but in reality, you can spend as much time as you want wandering around the open world and collecting cheese wheels, before finally deciding you want to progress the story. Or perhaps you are playing Arthur Morgan as a good and honorable man, for an outlaw anyway, but the game still requires you to mount a Gatling gun while you're in the middle of robbing a train and mow down poor lawmen just trying to do their jobs. I say all that because in the case of Ghost of Tsushima, Jin's evolution from a samurai who upholds every letter of his law to a near mythological figure happens slowly and progresses along with the video game mechanics. As you level up and unlock technique points, you are able to increase the speed with which Jin kills from the shadows. This doesn't just make for better and more efficient gameplay, it also fits neatly into the themes and narrative of the story. Jin's first break from tradition was messy, sloppy, and just a real struggle for him. By the end of the game, he is opening Mongol throats in one deft motion and then swiftly moving on to the next unsuspecting victim without a second thought. Lord Shimura, of course, would call such behavior cowardly. So the next question we should ask is simply this: is Jin Sakai a coward? To answer that question, let's revisit the opening scene of the game.
We are 80 samurai against an army, fighting to slow the invasion. Today, I die for my people.
Those don't sound like the words of a coward to me. Quite the opposite, in fact. The virtue that Jin displays most consistently and unwaveringly is, without a doubt, courage. The brand of bravery embodied by our protagonist is the classic kind. He charges into battle against overwhelming odds, repeatedly. He refuses to give up even after suffering setbacks and defeats. He endures an enormous weight of responsibility under which lesser men would buckle and break. Like any good story that deals with this theme, which is hardly avoidable given the game's setting, Ghost of Tsushima prompts us to ask, what is courage? Is it the willingness to throw oneself headlong into battle against an impossibly strong foe? Is it loudly declaring your presence to the enemy so you might engage in honorable combat? Is it the lack of fear and doubt even in the most tumultuous and dangerous situations? No, not really, anyway. Those might be manifestations of courage, but they also might be foolhardiness, the vice that a man might arrive at when all that matters to him is not being a coward. Ultimately, courage is simply the willingness to do what is right in any given situation, no matter the odds or the consequences. It is, as C.S. Lewis put it, the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the highest point of reality. Another word for courage is fortitude, so I think of it as fortifying all the other virtues. Choosing temperance when tempted by gluttony requires fortitude. Exerting self-discipline when sloth is so much easier requires fortitude. Persisting in difficulty when the easy way is oh so inviting requires fortitude. And of course, standing up to rampaging Mongols definitely calls for courage, but not a lack of fear. After all, how can any virtue be at the testing point if it is not opposed by vice? If a man is not afraid, he is likely just a fool.
Fear drives you to be stronger, fight harder. My father taught me that.
Without fear, bravery cannot exist. Jin's courage under fire is evident from the very beginning and never wavers throughout the story. We should note his why, however, as that is of utmost importance. Men have charged into battle for all sorts of reasons throughout history. Some were bloodthirsty conquerors, others were swept up by a wave of propaganda and national enthusiasm. Still others simply because their duty demanded it and their brothers relied on them. But true heroes love not the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory, but only that which they defend. Jin fights for the people of Tsushima, the ones he has been chosen to protect and serve. He didn't choose that duty.
But it was that or starve. I didn't have a choice.
I didn't choose to be a samurai either.
but he carries it out with persistence and fortitude nonetheless. Again, one of the best illustrations of Jin's courage comes near the beginning of the story, shortly after Yuna has nursed him back to health and the two are on the verge of escaping the Mongol-ridden village.
We can save everyone.
I'm done running, and I can finally help.
Damn it!
Thank you, my lord. They said all the samurai were dead.
Just before, Jin had witnessed villagers being run through by the Mongols, but was powerless to intervene as he had not yet reclaimed his katana.
There's nothing we can do for her.
But I can save the others.
And it was clear that having to make such a decision wounded him deeply. Hiding in the shadows, surviving while the people he was duty-bound to protect were being cut down in front of his very eyes urged Jin to swear never again. While I certainly wouldn't hold Jin up as a paragon of virtue, he's far too conflicted for that, I do appreciate that his selfless love for the people of Tsushima never falters. Having that true and pure driving force behind his actions is what makes him a hero, albeit an ultimately tragic one. It is also what drives him to break from his code, as he is repeatedly forced to choose between the lives of those whom he serves and the code which has been instilled in him since childhood. Having to make that choice and dealing with the consequences creates these central internal and interpersonal conflicts for Jin, because it seems that whether he chooses one way or the other, in doing so he will damage or even destroy his integrity. Now, integrity is an interesting concept because you could reasonably say that one who has integrity will act predictably according to a given standard set of rules, laws, etc. Lord Shimura, by that definition, is a man of utmost integrity. He is true to himself, he has his code, and he sticks to it unflinchingly, regardless of what it costs him and the men who serve him. I think you can see we're running into a familiar problem, but rather than reiterate it myself, I'll let a young would-be superhero lay out the issue at hand.
You always say be true to yourself, but you never say which part of yourself to be true to.
Human beings, after all, are remarkably complex. We have within us a swirling mishmash of desires, motivations, and convictions that constantly clash with each other, which is why integrity is both so valuable and so rare. How is a man to know to which part of himself he should be true? Which set of feelings or beliefs are the ones which he should allow to guide his actions? That's a much larger question than the scope of this video, but often the answer we choose is simply whatever works at a certain point in time, when we reach a testing point. And if we continue acting according to whatever belief or guideline we decided to follow at that critical juncture, we will form a habit. Continue acting in that same manner, and you will have a form of integrity. An imperfect one, likely, as found in Lord Shimura, but not without merit. I say imperfect because consistently acting according to one's convictions is only truly good, so long as your beliefs are actually true, so long as your priorities are properly set and your conduct properly ordered. Perfect integrity would require one to be guided in his actions by a perfect set of external standards. And, well, perfection is something that has largely evaded humanity's grasp throughout our history. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try day by day to get ever closer to it. In Jin's case, he displays an integrity that, ironically, shifts and changes. For his whole life up till now, being a man of integrity meant adhering to his code, his tradition. In realizing that there exist higher goods than the democracy of the dead, Jin began to reforge his integrity. It feels kind of odd saying that, claiming that Jin found a better and nobler way when that way involves sabotage and killing from the shadows. And I don't mean to suggest that every new tactic Jin adopts as the Ghost is in fact honorable and good. He himself wouldn't make that argument, as we'll see later on. We've barely touched on the idea of honor itself to this point in the video. Sure, it's been present as an underlying theme, but what is honor? This is a question Shimura asks young Jin early on in our story.
What does honor mean to you?
I guess protecting people. The ones who can't fight for themselves.
You have a good heart. But first, we must show everyone that we serve our Lord with courage, integrity, and self-control.
You say that like it's easy.
It's never easy, Jin. I struggle with it every day. But we must set an example for our people by remaining true to our code and to ourselves. That is the meaning of honor.
Jin's answer is one of childlike idealism. Perhaps it would be a bit foreign to feudal Japan, but the desire to protect the weak, to fight for those who cannot defend themselves, to become the champion of the people, and to stand in the breach against all who would do them harm, has doubtless been a dream of young men for thousands of years. Now, that desire can certainly tend towards pridefulness, if one is caught up in visions of glorious victory and the desire to be lauded by the people as their hero and savior, and all the various benefits such a status would confer. But it isn't wrong to want to do great deeds. We all should have the desire for greatness within us. The longing for and willingness to perform great acts is the virtue of magnanimity, one that Jin displays naturally and consistently.
Can you take a dozen enemy soldiers without me?
If I must.
Good answer.
Samurai,
You tortured and abused my people.
accept Mongol rule, and your people will not suffer.
You're a liar and a coward. You deserve nothing less than death.
It's important to remember that magnanimity and humility are not at all opposed to one another. Jin is, in fact, quite humble despite his confidence and self-assuredness. Or, I should say, his humility allows him to be confident and self-assured without being an obnoxious blowhard. The humble man does not waste time bowing and scraping or belittling himself, but instead knows his role, his purpose, and he seeks to fulfill them. For a samurai, his duty is one that, especially in time of war, will naturally call for the doing of great deeds. Jin does not seek to crush the Mongols under his heel because he wants the people of Tsushima to admire his strength and prowess, but simply because that is what he is called to do in this place and time. And although he doesn't have any desire to revel in the people's praise, he does acknowledge the importance of what he is doing in the example he sets.
Some of them are calling you the Ghost.
After you put the idea in their heads,
These people stay because they believe in you.
they should believe in the samurai.
To them, you're both.
At that point in the story, Jin has clearly begun to become something of a legend among the people of Tsushima, and not in a particularly pure way. Sure, his people love him, or at least the tales of his exploits, but when they see them firsthand, things are a little bit different.
That man fought like an animal or a demon.
The way he killed them. He's not human. Maybe you're right.
This theme is only beginning to build here, but we can already tell that Jin doesn't exactly love being viewed this way. It's one thing to do what is necessary, but it's quite another to have a spotlight pointed at you while you do. In this case, that spotlight's name is Yuna.
I've never seen a samurai fight like that. It was nothing.
You are more than a samurai. He is a vengeful spirit, back from the grave to slaughter the Mongols.
It's to Jin's credit that he doesn't immediately and wholeheartedly accept the mantle of the Ghost. He never longed for fame and notoriety, even as he sought to be an example for his people. His reluctance tells us that he does believe the way of the samurai is better than the path he has chosen out of necessity, that he does not relish in the deeds he does and the way he chooses to fight. That is important. We are, after all, discussing Jin's integrity, which he seems to violate by acting as he does, striking with ferocity and brutality from the shadows. I think the man would accuse himself of being a hypocrite, which is, in this case, kinda good. It would feel wrong for Jin to abandon his code and then be happy about it. Again, his first assassination is a wonderful portrayal of how much of a struggle this choice is for him. And while making that decision in the moment might become easier and easier the more he does it, the weight of those choices will certainly add up, continuing to pile more and more guilt on Jin's head. Whether or not he actually should feel that guilt isn't really the question, however. I mean, to this point in the story, Jin's crimes against the samurai code are basically just not shouting his name before charging into combat.
My name is Kyobu Masataka Oniwa! As I breathe, you will not pass the castle gate!
He is openly at war with the Mongols. The moral difference between hitting an enemy from 100 yards away with an arrow and sneaking up behind them in order to open their throats is, if you ask me, quite negligible. Enemy combatants are enemy combatants. Oh, you failed to detect the samurai coming and he stabbed you in the back. Sounds like a skill issue, bro. But that's easy for me to say. I wasn't raised by a man who soundly rejected even the smallest departure from his rigid code of honor. Jin should wrestle with changing his code. His struggle shows him to be a man of integrity, a man who believes in acting in a moral and upright fashion, but also one who isn't quite sure what that means anymore. In times of crisis, we so often look to a single guiding principle, and with his island in flames, his friends lying dead, and every vestige save one of his old life destroyed, Jin finds his North Star. Defend the people of Tsushima. Protect those who remain, those who cannot protect themselves. A just cause, however, does not by itself sanctify acts taken to further it, and while I can't say that I find Jin's actions thus far to be worthy of reprimand, it's important to emphasize that redrawing lines and rewriting codes can be good, if done in accordance with objective moral truth, but the lines need to be redrawn, not simply erased. Jin needs to have a new line that he will not cross. Does he? Well, kinda? I do wish the game had presented him with more choices. It kinda does later on, but that option is a clear no-brainer. Would Jin be willing to sacrifice a few of his people, say those who had already been taken captives by the Mongols for some nefarious purpose or another, in order to keep the invaders satiated and not invoke their wrath on a particular village to save dozens or hundreds of lives? The danger of departing from his code, even if doing so was justified, was that it's all too easy to simply keep going, thinking that as long as he is serving his people, or even just most of his people, he can do whatever he judges must be done. As we see when Jin and friends rescue Shimura, that is his uncle's worry.
I heard of your exploits while I was in prison. Your methods were brutal, impulsive, without honor.
I did what I had to. For you.
I know, Jin. And I will be forever in your debt. But you can't continue down this path. All of Tsushima looks to us for guidance. We must save our home together. As samurai.
Okay, I thought the writing in this game was generally good, especially in the main story, but there are moments that I thought could have been improved. 5 or 10%. In that clip I just played, I would have preferred Lord Shimura question Jin more intensely about his methods. Yes, he had been told by Khotun Khan about the ghost stabbing Mongols in the back, but why would he believe such stories? In fact, he doesn't believe them.
Then why have my men found their brothers stabbed in the back?
Lord Sakai would never resort to such tactics.
War brings out who we truly are.
But then we get to this scene, and Shimura just assumes every nasty rumor about Jin is true. Which, of course, they are. But I think that this scene would have carried more weight if Shimura demanded answers and Jin was forced to confess to his so-called crimes to his uncle. And perhaps to then pledge his refound loyalty to the samurai code and promise to fight honorably in the future. Instead, they just kind of changed the subject, and it's not as impactful as it could have been when Jin once again resorts to using stealth and deception, which, of course, he does. I mean, he basically conquered an entire castle single-handedly, even beating Ryuzo in a duel in the process. Super easily, I might add. I definitely didn't die 30-some times in that fight. Okay, actually, this seems like a good place to broach this subject. I'm going to talk about the game's combat for a bit. If you want to skip ahead to the rest of the story analysis, here's a timestamp to go to. So I played the entire game on lethal difficulty, which overall was an incredible experience. I cannot stand hard modes that turn basic enemies into massive damage sponges, as that completely ruins the immersion the moment I step into combat. Looking at you, God of War, how am I supposed to believe Kratos is this mighty warrior when it takes him 10 plus hits to kill a stupid Draugr? But in Ghost of Tsushima, the hardest difficulty makes it so that, depending on your armor choices, you die in a hit or two. Sometimes you might be able to tank more, but so do your enemies. I think the most hits you'll ever need to dispatch the tankiest of enemies during normal combat is 4, and that's only if you're not using a kit that optimizes your damage. I cannot emphasize enough how fun this was for me. I like it when my character will die with only a few hits, as it increases the tension and improves the immersive experience. It makes it feel more realistic, basically. It forces me to play thoughtfully and intentionally, using all the tools the game gave me to conquer any given encounter. In a game where you are supposed to conquer your enemy through your superior training, having to actually rely on my own developed skill is so much more satisfying than simply blasting through enemies by pressing square. But I'm only going to have the patience to develop that skill if enemies go down with a reasonable number of hits. When things go right, skirmishes in Ghost of Tsushima end very, very quickly. Yes, there's the chance that I'll have to retry an encounter over and over again, but I know that if I just got good, I could be done with this in a matter of moments. If I know that I'm going to have to juggle 5 enemies who each take a dozen hits every time I respawn, I'm not going to waste my time on that. Lethal difficulty is the ultimate tough but fair mode, if you ask me. That is, until you get to the duels. And look, I get it, the devs wanted these to feel like proper boss fights, to differentiate them from the ordinary Mongol horde whom you can mow through like wheat if you're good enough. But in reality, they just felt cheap. There were so many attacks that would one-shot me, but I had to whittle my opponent down bit by tiny bit. Thankfully, at some point, I realized that I could actually be more aggressive in these duels, and that made things a lot easier, but it still felt odd to have to hit an enemy 20 plus times to win the fight, as opposed to maybe 2 or 3. I, for one, would have been totally okay with these duels being like any other fight, except perhaps your opponent's guard is harder to break. That way you could actually display their superior skill, but it wouldn't become tedious. But the duels ultimately were a very small part of the game's combat, which was absolutely superb overall. Some games like Red Dead Redemption 2 have combat that is okay, and while I might enjoy it, I'm mostly looking forward to the story or simply roaming the world. In Ghost of Tsushima, I was excited and eager to clear every Mongol camp, occupied farm, and captured fort. Truly a superb combat system with one minor blemish. But that's enough of that. If you skipped ahead, welcome. We will now continue our analysis of the story and characters. What Jin finds shortly after rescuing his uncle from captivity is that his legend has grown far beyond he could have ever expected. The next stage in their little insurgency's plan to wrest control of Tsushima back from the Mongols involves recruiting the people of Yarikawa to their cause, a task that is, on the face of it, practically impossible due to the fact that that region rebelled against the Jito's rule some 20-ish years ago and were put down by Lord Shimura, their clan officially, if not actually, disbanded. The people of that region have no love for Clan Shimura and by association Clan Sakai, but for the Ghost, well, things are different.
First, tell me the name of the dead samurai you stole your gear from.
He's not a thief. He's the ghost.
The ghost?
I never thought Lord Shimura's nephew would be responsible for the ghost. You best be careful, or he'll punish you, as he punished my once great family.
I know you're a Sakai, but you didn't mention you're the ghost. Will we have your help breaking the siege? The stories are true. I've never seen anyone fight like you.
Jin desires to be humble, and he already has a pretty solid grasp of what true humility is. He doesn't try to make himself out to be less than he is. His status as samurai as the nephew of Lord Shimura demands that he rise to meet a high responsibility. Humility in that instance would not be saying, no, I couldn't possibly, but rather to accept the truth of the circumstances, that the people of the island look to him for an example, for protection, for guidance, and in order to best serve them, he must be as good, as great as possible. Jin never sought status as a legend, and that is what makes him a suitable one. Those who aspire to greatness almost never reach it, not true greatness, anyway. Most often, their greatness is simply power and wealth, corruptive forces that tend to preclude the virtue of magnanimity. It is not so with Jin Sakai. The mantle of the ghost is something he accepts with reluctance and hesitation, but he does accept it, because it is, right now, what his people need. In a time where they feel trapped and powerless, the ghost has become a sign that resisting the Mongols is not only right, but is possible. The problem with looking to the samurai for everything is that such an attitude naturally creates a reliance upon them. When the samurai are gone, the people feel powerless. By standing apart from the samurai, by being a warrior for and of the people, the ghost encourages and empowers them, as we see in the battle for Yarikawa.
Hey, the ghost!
The ghost! Save us!
Oh, Yarikawa! For the ghost! Drive them back! Hold this gate!
The ghost! Hold the gate!
With that battle won, Jin reaches something of a crossroads. In order to have any chance at winning this war, he has to embrace the legend he has become. The ghost can no longer merely be a samurai who also engages in stealth tactics when necessary. Whether or not he asked for it, Jin has been given a status far above what he expected or desired. He can use it to inspire those who believe in the ghost, or he can abandon that title, discarding along with it the ability to motivate, galvanize, and empower the people whom he cares about, whom he has sworn to defend to the death. So of course, Jin chooses, as he has always chosen. The safety and survival of the people of Tsushima come first. If that means he must accept that he is the ghost, then so be it.
We saved your town. Now, we help Lord Shimura save our island!
We are not soldiers!
Who killed these Mongols? Who stood against the siege? Who saved Yarikawa? We did!
You can't just stay here and wait for the Mongols to try again!
You say you are not soldiers. You are warriors. We can defeat the invaders and save our home, but only if we stand together.
I liked this game's story, I really did, but some of the dialogue would have benefited a lot from just another pass to make it less basic. Sorry, this isn't really a critique video, but when a game looks and plays this freaking good, I want the writing to match. Thematically, it absolutely does, but the moment-to-moment and line-to-line dialogue is somewhat inconsistent. But that's really beside the point here. What's important is Jin's complete and total acceptance of his status as the people's hero, as a legend. The problem with legends, however, especially those who earn their reputation through violence and bloodshed, is that they are easily twisted into monsters. We'll get to Act 3 in a bit, but even before Jin goes down that path, he has a couple of encounters that act as a warning for him, for what truly and fully becoming the ghost might mean. First, there was the mystery of the ghost and the demon sensei, where innocent travelers are being slaughtered and the murders pinned on Jin and Sensei Ishikawa. This naturally leads to the people of the surrounding area experiencing abject terror when Jin Sakai himself shows up on their doorstep.
Ah! The ghost! Don't kill me!
What's going on?
This incident is an excellent illustration of why the samurai code is the way it is. No one would ever suspect Lord Shimura of wantonly killing travelers for the crime of traveling, as is apparently the case here for the ghost. But when Jin broke from his code, he opened the door to such suspicions. The people of his island cheer his unrestrained war against the Mongols, with good reason, but his newfound freedom of brutality is, we see, not without cost. The samurai were upfront and open about meting out such punishments, as Jin tells a villager early on in the story who expressed some trepidation about Sensei Ishikawa.
I'd hate to cross an archer like that.
Do you deserve death?
I hope not, my lord.
Then you're safe from Ishikawa.
The people knew what to expect from the samurai. They may love the ghost for what he does, but he is also an unknown, a mystery, one capable of any number of brutalities. Who is to say that this unpredictable, vengeful spirit won't turn on the islanders?
But our people know what you did to the others. Now they're afraid the ghost will come for them next.
Good people have nothing to fear from me.
What do you believe, Ichi? Are we monsters?
I think you did what you had to.
I say all of that because to be a man of integrity, a man must know what he believes, must act accordingly, and must be in control of those all-important elements of his identity. A man who acts out of impulse or the emotion of the moment is not a man of integrity. He is wild, unpredictable, and, if as skilled and lethal as the Ghost of Tsushima, dreadfully frightening. This is the challenge that Jin faces in becoming the legend, even one that his people badly need at this hour. He is in danger of fully losing himself to the ghost, becoming whatever and doing whatever is needed for his people. If he becomes a man without limits, one who will cross any line for the sake of survival, even that of others, he loses his integrity, he loses himself.
Don't become like me. Don't let the ghost
consume you.
Jin Sakai is a hero, yes, but a tragic hero. The story of Ghost of Tsushima is not a happy one. Jin Sakai does not love doing what he does, fighting the way he has been forced to fight.
Forgive me, Uncle.
And the recognition of his brutal methods by those close to him undoubtedly hits home, stirring the conflict within him.
You butchered them.
Nevertheless, he persists, even in that same scene with that same character, an old family servant who essentially raised Jin after the death of his mother, who makes the mistake of telling Jin about the poison she uses to keep rats at bay, and whom Jin then coerces into making it more potent. Like, really potent. That has got to be the fastest acting poison I've ever seen, even in a video game. Said poison will, as it turns out, be the main linchpin for the story in the third act, both for the plot and for Jin's character arc. To set the stage properly, though, Jin, his uncle, and their allies are in the process of retaking Castle Chimera when Jin, well, I'll just let you watch.
Run, cowards!
Jin! What are you doing?
Clearing the way.
Not like that. Never like that. Face them as a warrior with honor, not a monster.
It's all they understand.
Terror is not the weapon of a samurai.
Following that confrontation, the samurai forces proceed further into the castle and are poised to assault the keep when Khoten Khan sends out his version of the Berserker Urukai from the Two Towers movie. And yeah, that could have gone better. This disaster naturally stokes the flames of conflict between uncle and nephew.
The Mongols are on the defensive. We will strike before they regroup and end this war tomorrow.
You sent our men to die.
They are soldiers.
Their blood is on our hands. I can find a way past the bridge. Poison the enemy.
An act of terror.
I am trying to save our people.
By teaching them to fear us. If you continue down this path, you will be no better than the Mongols. I trained you to fight with honor.
Honor died on the beach. The Khan deserves to suffer.
You are ruled by your emotion.
I sacrificed everything I knew to save our people. I gave them hope. You did nothing! No. We're finished.
At this point in the story, there's not really much else I can say about Jin's adoption of the Ghost. He has, clearly, found the old ways of fighting to be ineffective and even harmful, their usefulness expended in this new era and against this new foe. Does he venture into dangerous waters by sneaking into the Mongol camp and poisoning their milk? I would say so, yeah. It is certainly crossing yet another line, a step beyond killing with the blade or bow from the shadow, but he is at least not targeting innocents to further his cause, unlike someone we will discuss later. Could Jin have come up with a better way, a more honorable way of using stealth? Cutting down a few guards so we could open the gates to Shimura's forces, perhaps? Again, I would have preferred if the story actually showed Jin tempted, but refusing to cross some line in the sand. I want to know that there are methods he would not employ, even if he thinks they might result in the quote-unquote greater good. Without such a moral test, Jin's integrity is simply acting by the question of whether or not he is acting to save as many people of Tsushima as possible, which is a noble goal, but there have to be costs that he wouldn't be willing to pay. What are those? I don't know. The question never really gets asked. That's not to say that there aren't costs to Jin's newfound course of action, however. For one, there is the fact that he gets disowned and arrested for acting against the samurai code, which apparently is in fact a law and not just an unwritten rule that everyone follows out of respect for tradition.
The castle is yours. The Khan marches north. We can head him off.
You defied me!
I did what I had to. For them.
Is this how you want to be remembered?
He defended us!
By spreading fear and chaos!
We are at war.
And you are acting like the enemy. This is not our way.
Your way can't save our people.
Some will demand a head. But it does not have to be yours. I know she drove you to this.
Uncle.
Renounce the ghost. You must blame her for this outrage. Tell them you are Jin Shimura, loyal servant to the Shogun. My heir. My son.
I am not your son. I am the ghost.
And you will be judged for it.
Find the Khan.
Jin.
Futaka. Go!
Jin's imprisonment doesn't last long, however, at least not in game time. I guess the developers figured people didn't want to spend half an hour playing the flute and watching the sun rise and set. And when Jin does escape, he finds another cost for his actions. This one, paid by the very same people he has been fighting to protect.
The Mongols learned how to make my poison. Now they're using it against us.
Now look, I get that we wanted this theme of the cost of Jin's chosen path, how terror is an indiscriminate weapon that, when wielded, cannot be trusted to only target enemy combatants. But if the Mongols wanted villagers dead, they could just cut them down or burn their houses while they sleep. Sure, Jin gave them a new way to sow fear among the local populace, but it's not exactly like the Mongols lacked ways to do that before. Basically, I like the idea of this theme, but I think it could have been executed a lot better. The poison feels kinda weak, especially as it supposedly gives Khotun Khan what he needs to conquer the mainland, and thus kicks off the final confrontation in the battle for Tsushima. If you haven't played the game or forgotten, I'm really not kidding. Jin and Yuna find barrels of the stuff and act as if they've discovered a nuclear bomb.
Ships full of men, explosives, and my poison. If we don't stop him here, the shogunate will fall.
Bro, what? It's a bunch of poison. You're talking about an army that figured out how to make a weapon that fires dozens of explosive arrows hundreds of yards. I refuse to believe that a few flowers that can be ground down to a paste, which must then be ingested or injected via dart, move the needle at all when it comes to Mongol military might. I fail to see even how this poison grenade of theirs would be any more effective than the aforementioned Hwachas. This whole time, the Quan has been trying to recruit the people of Tsushima to join his forces for the assault on the mainland. First, he attempted to convince Lord Shimura, then when the Jito proved too stubborn, Khotun had Jin captured, which happened way too easily, and tried his luck with the ghost, figuring that people would listen to their legend. But those efforts ultimately failed, and he is slowly but surely losing control of Tsushima as Jin and friends wrest it back from the Mongols. But now that he has some poison on hand, the Khan thinks he is able to take on all of Japan. Maybe he should, actually conquer Tsushima first? If he can't handle one lone samurai who plays a little loose with the rules, what chance does he have at subjugating an island full of thousands of potential Jin Sakais? I am, however, getting off track. I do appreciate the game at least trying to show the broader cost of Jin's new ways. It wouldn't feel right if he abandoned his code of honor and then found his new methods to be not only utterly effective, but without any repercussions. I just don't love how the poison plotline was handled. Good theme, mediocre execution. Jin does acknowledge, by the way, that he recognizes the ugliness of this new way of killing.
But we must set an example for our people by remaining true to our code and to ourselves.
The poison's just for now. After the Mongols are gone, I won't need it.
But do we think Jin could ever really give it up? Obviously, he intends and wants to, But if he were to only use the poison when needed, well then just for now doesn't really mean anything. If you're not willing to do what is right in all places and at all times, then you can hardly be a man of perfect integrity, which Jin is not, and that's alright. As I said a bit earlier, he is very much a tragic hero, one who seeks a noble goal but is tortured and haunted by the decisions he makes and the failures and losses he endures, but one who pushes forward anyway, who does not lose himself in his fear, anger, and lust for vengeance. Jin is, as all samurai should be, a solid model of temperance. Now, when I say temperance, I do not mean that Jin is a member of the movement responsible for the 18th Amendment in the United States Constitution. Instead, I mean that he is an example of restraint, of not letting his emotions control his actions, but rather acting out of a sense of moral duty. The samurai were, in a sense, Eastern Stoics, but perhaps even a bit stricter with their attitude towards showing emotion.
My uncle taught me that a samurai masters his emotions, like you master a horse or a blade.
That's a hard way to live.
It's not supposed to be easy.
I personally wouldn't consider myself a Stoic, mostly due to the generally negative attitude that said philosophy bears toward hope, which is, to my Catholic mind, a foundational virtue. But exercising mastery over your emotions, or at least not letting your emotions dominate and drive you, is an idea that I am fully behind. One Catholic teaching is that before original sin, humans possessed control of the passions by reason. We weren't emotionless robots who only acted out of pure logic, but people who could properly order our emotions and direct them toward the good, the true, and the beautiful. The samurai, at least as they are depicted in Lord Shimura, skew too far toward the emotionless end of the spectrum, living by their code and their code alone, rejecting emotions as weakness, rather than seeking to find the strength that exists within them. As with many vices, this one was born out of a rejection of the opposite vice. As we've discussed before, the samurai code was established on Tsushima due to its prior lawlessness, where people were doubtless killing and stealing because, well, they felt like it. The samurai changed that, and often the chosen way, if not the best way, to counter a given bad practice is to swing hard in the opposite direction.
Teach him that samurai never acts out of anger or fear, and take his life with honor.
It's important that we recognize the good in that way of life and death. If a samurai is going to make a choice that cannot be undone, he must do so with a clear head, and because it is right, not because he wants to, because he is driven to by his anger, fear, or desire for vengeance. This is the main theme depicted in most of the tales of the side characters, Masako, Norio, Yuna, and Ishikawa, all of them seeking vengeance in one way or another. And some struggle with that desire, while others have given themselves to it without hesitation or remorse. An example of the latter would be Lady Masako, whose husband was ignominiously killed by Khoten Khan at Komada Beach, and whose family was then mysteriously murdered by unknown assailants. To the shock of nobody, she then resolves not to rest until those responsible for her family's deaths are found and brought to justice. And if you're wondering what her brand of justice looks like, well... which, as far as I know, is pretty accurate for feudal Japan. The death penalty was the most common one, and practically the only one in some cases, and the samurai were generally allowed to hand it out for far less grievous crimes than the ones perpetrated by the people whom Masako kills. Which makes it weird then when she talks about a servant who was found stealing from her family.
She looted Clan Adachi's estate after the attack, stole valuable heirlooms, personal items. What makes it worse is that Mai was our former servant. 3 years ago, my husband caught her stealing. He wanted to have her flogged. I did what I could for her, but she had to go.
Yeah, I don't believe you. Maybe I'd buy Lord Adachi wanting to execute the thief on the spot, but Masako convincing him to instead having her publicly flawed and denounced. But telling me that this samurai allowed a grave insult to his honor to go essentially unpunished is absurd. Adachi wouldn't just fire the thief. His honor would absolutely demand that she be punished, and she'd be lucky to escape with her head. This is an instance of one of the main problems I have with this game's writing. It is, at times, altogether too soft. It wants to depict the uncaring nature of the samurai code and show how its lack of respect for the individual is harmful, but it basically restricts that attitude to Lord Shimura. Almost everyone else could fit in pretty well in a modern Western society. Jin himself is far more forgiving and understanding than I expected him to be, most of the time anyway. When a man abandons his wife and daughter to save his own skin, Jin is remarkably chill about it.
I ran like a coward. I should be dead too.
It's not your fault. Don't let their deaths be in vain. Resist the invaders. Help those in need.
I'm not saying that Jin is wrong in saying that, and it's not like this guy needs more grief piled on his head, but I think this moment would have hit harder if this guy asks you to kill him, to spare him from having to live with his shame, and you as Jin have a choice whether or not to honor that request. Remember, I said that because we're going to come back to it later. Same sort of thing happens when this other guy works with the Mongols to ship goods across the island, resulting in the death of his own brother, who joined men attacking a Mongol caravan. Shockingly, Jin is incredibly forgiving.
You're free to go. If I hear you're working for the Mongols again...
They'd sooner kill me. And I cannot face my family after this. I have nothing. Nothing. What can I do now? What do I live for?
Again, Jin shouldn't take on the role of judge, jury, and executioner from an objective moral standpoint, but as a samurai, that's literally what he was. Or there's this lady who straight up lies to Jin's face about some bandits stealing her food. So Jin, believing her, goes and steals it back, gets noticed by the bandits, and, well... Once again, no option to mete out any punishment when she confesses to lying, other than a mild scolding.
You lied to me.
Bandits don't deserve food at a time like this, my lord. Besides, I asked you not to hurt them.
It gave me no choice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You shouldn't have lied. I still would have helped you.
I won't do it again. I promise.
Bro, she just got a half-dozen people killed because she lied to you. You don't think that earns her a fire arrow? The game, unfortunately, falls into this recent trend where it morally whitewashes its protagonist in certain areas because of this oddly puritanical view of people, which doesn't fit at all in a story that is all about moral complexity and making difficult choices. Jin refusing to perform summary execution, even when it definitely seems deserved, except in the case of the one dude who was selling women to the Mongols, which, fair, is one example. Another is when Masako admits that the servant whom she miraculously saved from any sort of actual punishment was in fact her lover. And Jin is just like, yeah, okay, makes sense. Now, look, I don't expect this 12th century samurai to share my Catholic views on sexual morality and denounce Masako and Mai's relationship as immoral, but I do expect him to act like who he is depicted to be. The attitude in feudal Japan toward sexuality was quite permissive, but that generally only applied to men, especially highborn men, being allowed multiple consorts in addition to their wife, and homosexual relationships/mentorships between older and younger men, especially samurai. Two women being an item simply wouldn't make sense to them because, you know, human anatomy. Can games set in a time period please at least try to write without injecting modern Western quote-unquote values and sentimentality into their characters? For another example, when Jin is on Iki Island, he has this exchange with one of the raiders.
May they find peace in the next life.
I didn't take you for a religious man.
I'm full of surprises.
That is modern language that just doesn't fit into the setting of this story, where I'm fairly certain the characters wouldn't have the first idea what being religious would even mean. Or take Lady Masako's sister, the surprise villain in that tale, complaining about the marriage that Masako arranged for her.
Left me with that abusive drunk in this frozen land.
Similarly, we hear Jin's disgust at hearing about an abusive father and husband.
We excused his behavior until the day I caught him beating his wife and daughter.
The coward, hurting his own family.
I dismissed him immediately.
This may come as a shock to you, but most pre-modern societies didn't view spousal abuse as a problem. It's not that Jin isn't right to condemn such disgusting behavior, it's that he simply wouldn't view it as base or depraved. According to the norms of 12th century Japan, the man was the master of the house, and if he wanted to beat his wife and children to discipline them, he was free to do so. Yes, it's cowardly, yes, it's weak and shameful, but these characters would not think that. I don't want Jin to speak or act like anybody I could meet on the street today, because this is a samurai game, and he's a samurai. The value in stories such as these is not that they reflect the attitudes of our own time, but rather that we might find in the actions and choices of these men and women from so long ago some timeless wisdom and ageless truths. You should be able to root for, relate to, and appreciate characters even if their attitudes towards certain issues do not match yours. If you can't, that's your problem. and it appears to be one the writers weren't able to conquer when creating Jin. But, for all its flaws, Ghost of Tsushima depicts the self-destructive reality of revenge quite well. This is best shown in the tale of Norio, the warrior monk who also embraces some measure of stoic philosophy.
Hochi thinks warrior monks are driven by anger and hate, but when I swing my naginata, I sacrifice the few to save the many, and I do it without hatred.
Of all the side character tales, this has to be my favorite. I would certainly argue that it is the best and most consistently written, so let's save it for last while we talk about the good and the bad of the other side quests. Masako's tale, while decent in theme, is repetitive, as you just track down one person after another that were written down on a convenient list of conspirators, and no, I'm not making that up. There's also apparently one monk on all of Tsushima who knows where all of these people are, and he consistently won't talk to Masako, but will talk to Jin. This happens 3 different times, if memory serves me, before Masako finally gets up and tries to kill the monk, prompting Jin to intervene and kicking off a duel, which leads to this exchange.
Masako, don't ever try to kill me again.
I won't. I promise.
I'm all for a forgiving and merciful protagonist, but when stuff like that happens, it just makes Jin look like a gullible, too trusting simpleton. I didn't mind the ending of this tale, though. Masaka and Hana both losing quite literally everything in their respective quests for revenge was a darkly satisfying conclusion. Yuna's similarly somber story features a mission where she has to face a reckoning from her past, hunting down slavers who once owned and sold her and her younger brother. By the time you get to this tale, the war has been raging for some time, and its effects on Jin are becoming clear. Throughout most of the side tales thus far, the supporting characters have been seeking vengeance, and while Jin doesn't stand in their way, he also doesn't encourage them.
I told Hina I would try to save her husband's life.
You know I'm going to kill him.
I had to gain her trust somehow.
So you lied.
I told her I would try to save him. And I will.
What will you tell her when you fail, Jin?
That you could not forgive his crime, and that I would not stand between you and justice.
Revenge, Jin understands, is not the same thing as justice. The former is driven by emotion, by anger and grief, and the latter by a sense of duty and responsibility. He will mete out lethal punishment if need be, but he will not relish in it.
The Mongols are gone.
Did they scream?
Their suffering isn't your concern.
Naturally, if you are not acting out of emotion, you will not find emotional release in your actions. Even when he departs from his strict rules of engagement, Jin does not discard the part of his code that states how he must conduct himself and govern his emotions.
You're quite the butcher with that sword.
The bandits would have killed those people.
You don't know that. You could have tried talking to them.
It would not have helped. You know that. You asked for my protection.
It's just... watching you, I can't help but wonder if you enjoy the violence.
I kill only to protect our people. I think about that every time I reach for my sword.
Of course. I'm sorry, my lord.
However, in the tale of Yuna, we see the toll that weeks of war have exacted on our hero's ability to maintain his stoic composure when faced with the memory of suffering, and given the chance to exact vengeance on those who have committed and continue to commit grave evil, enslaving innocent people, their own people, and selling them to the invaders.
I can't go back in there.
You don't have to. Stay here. I will deliver your vengeance.
Make them suffer, Jin. Taka. For every scar they gave us. For every head they collected from the tired workers who just asked for more water. Make them suffer for me.
I can repay their cruelty and take their heads.
That won't be enough. Not after Altan pushed them to this.
I will kill them where they sleep, without being seen. Show Altan that no one is beyond the reach of the ghost.
Jin then does as he promised, and I have to ask, where exactly did he keep the severed heads while he went to collect the others? Anyway, these scenes clearly show that Jin is not the same man as he was back at that bridge or even with Lady Masako. He is, as Yuna said, a vengeful spirit.
Tell me they suffered.
Not as much as they deserved.
However, that side of Jin disappears almost completely when you reach the end of the Iki Island questline, where he finally finds and confronts his father's killer, who I thought was dead.
Your father was murdered. Did you talk with his killer? Lord Shimura tracked him down and collected his head.
Whatever. I wish I could say I loved this storyline, and I'm all in favor of a hero choosing forgiveness instead of vengeance, but the way it was handled here was odd. We get a few flashbacks / dream sequences / hallucinations that try to make us believe that Jin, as a boy, wasn't the son his father wanted.
I tried to teach the child all I know, but he acts more like a poet than a samurai. Soft, clumsy. He dies in battle. The future of our clan is in danger.
The game also tries this tactic later in another side quest, and I just don't buy it. What about Jin Sakai suggests that he was ever soft and clumsy? Also, samurai are poets, that's the whole haiku thing that they do. Jin forgiving himself for failing to die in a vain attempt to protect his father is fine. Good even, if handled well, but it's pretty clear that they retcon some stuff here because they wanted Jin to reject his father's vision of who he should be for some reason. I mean, the initial flashback where you see Kazumasa die is pretty clearly not in the middle of a canyon, but then you find out that he was apparently killed in an ambush in a canyon, but actually I guess he fought his way out to this little hut in which Jin hid while his father was dealt the final blow. Also, this bandit totally sees young Jin, right? He's not exactly hiding super well. Whatever. In the middle of this questline's final boss battle, which is against a 70-year-old woman, Jin has a vision where he talks to his dad's spirit, I guess, one last time.
Jin. We should have died here together. Like warriors.
I'm sorry I failed you, Father.
Not me. Our clan. The Sakai name is tarnished.
The people here accuse us of terrible things.
Sometimes, what is necessary is also terrible. The actions I took were not easy. But they needed to be done.
You did what was needed on the battlefield. Not at home. I needed a father.
When we lost your mother, I was left with a son I didn't know how to help. So, I raised a samurai. It's time, Jin. Do what is necessary. Rid our clan of shame and defeat. Avenge me. Kill him, you coward!
No. I will never be like you. The way you lived was not my choice. And your death was not my fault.
I'm sorry. I will never be like you? Bro, your dad just said, sometimes what is necessary is also terrible. You, Jin, are the man who caused dozens of men to die horrifying, agonizing deaths in order to save the lives of your people. How is that not at all like what Kazumasa did? I mean, yeah, they make Jin's dad out to be a bit of a butcher, but we aren't actually shown in any amount of detail what he did when attempting to subjugate the literal pirates with whom Jin is now allied. So I don't know how the player is supposed to believe Jin isn't full of malarkey when he proclaims himself different from his father. I'd be more okay with how all that ended if Jin at least told the raiders that they better knock off their habits of robbing merchant ships, or the ghost will come for them next, but no, he's just kind of chill with them. His father was the problem, apparently, not the merry gang of pirates. But hey, at least this questline unlocked the ability to horse charge. I do enjoy feeling like one of the Rohirrim on the causeway at Helm's Deep. Okay, we were talking about the tales of the various side characters and how Jin demonstrates self-control, although not perfectly consistently, and we have two remaining. The first of which is the tale of Ishikawa, the samurai archery master whose peasant student attacked him and fled. Sensei Ishikawa is one of the more complex stories in this game, a man who wants to be noble, to truly be samurai, but who is racked by pride and an unhealthy obsession with his art, his way of the bow, which his student Tomoe apparently inherited. Jin is initially trusting of Ishikawa, but that attitude starts to unravel as the sensei is found to be less forthcoming with the truth than he ought to be.
I should have killed her.
Sensei?
Tomoe won her freedom, and she joined the Mongols.
Why would she do that? What happened?
I pushed her too hard.
Pushed her how? What are you hiding? I demand an answer.
She attacked me. Not bandits. Tomoe.
That revelation kicks off a series of questions and future revelations that Ishikawa does not give up willingly. The sensei is quite the prideful man, and as any Avatar: The Last Airbender fan knows, pride inevitably leads to shame. Despite his mastery with the bow, Ishikawa's legacy is one of failure.
She knows the last student I trained before her was Hironori Nagao.
You said he wasn't your student. Which is it?
I was young, prideful, callous. Hironori learned from my example. He led a rebellion to seize the clan, and lost, but only after butchering Lord Nagao's best men.
Hironori didn't die fighting bandits.
That was a story to protect Nagao's legacy. There was no saving mine. As his teacher, I could never be trusted again. I was granted the mercy to resign my position. I convinced myself the way of the bow had to survive. But the truth is, I am a coward who should have ended it long ago.
The actual why behind Tomoe's betrayal isn't exactly clear, but what is clear is that A, she did use Ishikawa's teachings for evil, and B, he blames himself for that.
She used my teaching to help a band of assassins. They paid well.
It still doesn't explain why she attacked you.
Sakai, how does a samurai deal with an assassin?
You retaliated and attacked her.
I dealt with Tomoe as I would any common murderer.
Those failures weigh heavily upon him, and he feels the need to make up for them.
This is my fight. I don't need your weapon.
No, you need me.
And I'm not about to condemn Ishikawa for wanting to right his wrongs, but the man's unyielding need to take down Tomoe to protect what little is left of his legacy is not the healthiest of desires. While Jin wants to stop Tomoe because she is training Mongol archers and thus poses a threat to his people, Ishikawa's reasons are far more personal and less altruistic. As a result of his emotional attachment to this hunt, Ishikawa gets sloppy.
Even I make mistakes, Sakai.
No, you don't. Except with her.
Jin, by contrast, practically never lets his emotions cloud his ability to make judgments, at least not tactical ones. As we've noted earlier, Jin is a remarkably humble samurai who knows his role and carries it out for the sake of his people. Unlike Ishikawa, he doesn't have any major failures in his past, at least not ones from when he was an adult. Honestly, I think the Iki Island plot would have been much improved if it had centered on Jin's hunt for his father's killer, rather than him randomly stumbling across the guy by sheer dumb luck, and only realizing it's him because Tenzo was stupid enough to say, in front of Jin, the same line he said when he killed Kazumasa.
May your death benefit all beings. May your death benefit all beings.
It would have been interesting to watch Jin struggle with the same challenge as Ishikawa, helping him understand the sensei better. You could still have had the same general ending if you wrote it in a less daddy issues way, with Jin accepting that choosing to live instead of helplessly throwing his life away as a teenager really was okay, acknowledging that his duty to the people of Tsushima is more important than making up for his failure, and ultimately forgiving his father's killer. That certainly would have been more compelling than the magical slurp juice that drives the Iki Islands storyline, and it would have made the contrast between him and Ishikawa in their abilities to regulate their emotions and act logically and according to their duties more profound. Anyway, the reason I place the Ishikawa storyline below that of Norio's in terms of quality is largely because of the ending. To briefly summarize what happens, Jin runs into Tomoe pretending to be some random mountain woman. They talk. She asks about what it's like to be samurai and hold the power of life and death, and he gives a fantastic answer.
It's a heavy responsibility.
But you secretly enjoy it.
Only a monster would enjoy it.
Throughout this side story, we have heard time and time again how Tomoe is a born killer, and not just from Ishikawa.
She used to ride with a group of thieves who lived here.
That's not possible. Tomoe is from Umugi Prefecture.
She found her way here. Her bow terrorized Utsuna for years.
She has been painted as a bloodthirsty, remorseless monster, but all of a sudden, the story wants you to sympathize with her. Now, Jin, not knowing Tomoe, was at first open to the idea that she could be redeemed, could be an ally to them. After all, who is he to turn down a skilled archer in this fight against the Mongols? But then that goodwill fades after he witnesses one camp after another of Tomoe-trained Mongol archers and comes across this poor woman.
We're here to help.
She said...
Tomoe? What did she say?
She said I could live until the samurai came.
No!
Now, however, apparently the Khan has betrayed Tomoe. It's not clear why or how, and she is seeking to destroy her creations.
The Mongols turned against me.
After you trained them to slaughter our people.
A mistake I tried to fix. But I can't kill all my archers. Not alone.
Lady, that wasn't a mistake. You showed off your skill with the bow and offered to train the Mongols to kill better so you could survive.
They were being tortured. I offered a quick, painless death. And the Mongols spared me. I won't apologize for surviving.
Yeah, you should though. Would Jin have willingly helped the enemy, enabling them to kill his own people more efficiently? I'm pretty sure he would have died first. Any decent person would. I had to do it to survive is a garbage excuse when the it costs your own people who knows how many lives. Oh, but Tomoe claims...
Most of the time, I convinced them to spare lives.
Right, sure you did. It'd be nice if we had any evidence of that. We do have evidence that she orchestrated the murder of that innocent woman whom she used as bait. Oh, but once again, Tomoe claims.
That was not my doing.
And no one pushes back on that. Maybe it's supposed to be obvious that Jin and Ishikawa don't really believe her, but why don't they say anything? She's clearly lying, but does the game think she's lying? Does it want the player to think she's lying? If not, then why let her have the last word? Why ultimately let her sail off into the sunset, I guess the Mongol blockade doesn't exist anymore, without paying for her crimes? And just to be clear, Jin absolutely believes in lethal punishment for such crimes. There's a side mission where he investigates a town and discovers that one man has been orchestrating the selling of women to the Mongols, and has killed other men who try to stop him. At the end, after Jin has freed the woman, he gives the perpetrator his due punishment. See, that is how samurai dealt with criminals. I don't know why Jin is so soft on others throughout the game. Not that lying about bandits having stolen your food or leaving your family behind when the Mongols attacked is as bad as selling other human beings, but surely training enemy soldiers and using innocent civilians as bait is right up there, no? Sure, you might say it is, but ultimately Tomoe is Ishikawa's responsibility and Jin is content to let him decide her fate. Okay, fair enough, except he doesn't. At the end of this tale, after you have worked with Tomoe to blow up her archers, which of course gives her the chance to slip away unnoticed, she is sailing away on a boat, and Ishikawa is ready to put an arrow in her heart when Jin stops him.
Wait.
Sensei Ishikawa, we have judged each other harshly, but the Buddha tells us that our greatest enemies can be our best teachers.
I am grateful for your teaching, and for the chance to fight by your side a final time. I have been your student. I would have become your daughter, but the way of the bow is behind me now. What lies ahead? I am like an arrow, shot from a bow. Who knows where the wind will take me?
It's over.
Maybe she'll reach Kyoto after all.
If she were anyone else, I'd say that's impossible.
We still have a war to finish. A home to rebuild.
I have no more lessons to give in this life. Except one. Promise me, you won't repeat my mistakes.
And that's that. I liked Ishikawa's character. I loved how he was man enough at the end to give Jin that final lesson, but the handling of Tomoe's fate was incredibly lame. I'm all for redemption, but for that theme to land properly, we need to spend far more time with Tomoe. A few lines from her own mouth, some of which are patently and obviously false, and the others, quite doubtful, are not enough to convince any rational person that she is truly changed from the woman who terrorized villagers, who used her priceless training to help a band of assassins, and who killed the civilians so she could get at Ishikawa. The game could have redeemed her if it was willing to put in the work, but it wasn't, and as a result, the ending of this otherwise really solid tale falls totally flat. Let me assure you, however, that the tale of Norio does not end in such a lame duck manner. I will allow the man to introduce himself.
Our warrior monks rode south to fight the Mongols after we heard about Komoda. But our journey ended here.
Throughout most of his story, Norio is a model of self-restraint and proper temperance, fighting to protect his people and their home without being driven by anger or hatred. He is steadfast in his belief that doing so is right, even when challenged by a fellow monk whose profession as a healer has led him to be a pacifist. In doing so, Norio aims to honor the memory of his brother, the man named the Guardian of Tsushima, who sacrificed himself in Norio's place after they had been taken captive by the Mongols. And when it turns out that his brother was not, as he thought, killed by his captors, but was instead tortured for information, well, things change a bit for Norio.
The Mongol you're looking for. Harucho. Have you found him?
He's not far from here.
Norio, Sira Temple needs your leadership.
This comes first.
Revenge is not the first duty of a monk.
Before I was a monk, I was a brother.
However, Norio's anger is not only directed at the Mongols for being dirty, despicable mongrels, but at his brother as well. Why, you ask?
Mongols promised to spare you. If I told them everything.
I'm here, Enjo. It's all right now.
I told them about the abbey. Ochi, Kuchitsera, in Akashima.
Anjo, the Guardian of Tsushima, gave it all up, handed over to the invaders everything they could want from him in order to preserve Norio's life. A life that Norio himself does not hold in high regard.
I wish I had died fighting.
For many, many years, Norio had looked up to his brother, had allowed Anjo's example to guide him, even following him to Cedar Temple to become a warrior monk, but now he finds himself condemning his only remaining family, who sold out all of Tsushima to save the life of one man.
Your brother was the Guardian. He died a hero.
No, he didn't.
And that anger isn't going to stay bottled up, which leads to one of the most haunting scenes in this entire game.
Burn! Burn for your crimes, butcher!
The way that tale builds is fantastic. Norio starts out as your run-of-the-mill Survivor's Guild victim, who wants to make up for the fact that he didn't die along with his fellow warriors. Solid enough, but nothing new or exciting. He then has to explore his purpose now that he is essentially the last of his kind, and finds with Jin's help that he is capable of leading, of meeting the standards set by his assumedly late brother. And then, after that awful aforementioned revelation, he throws it all away in his anguish and despair, reveling in the pain he inflicts on the evil men who stole everything from him, not once, but twice. And then, if it were up to him, he'd be done.
When he screamed, it filled me with joy. And I would do it again. I'm no longer a monk.
You don't get to give up. We all have regrets and broken promises. But this island needs you. The last warrior monk of Cedar Temple.
I can't go back to what I was before this.
I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to keep your faith and move forward.
It's incredible how often that theme emerges once you start noticing it. We can't change what's done. We can only move on. What will you do now? We can't have what we once had, but we can make a new future. Norio, throughout his whole character arc, was essentially living in the past, fighting to honor a memory. It's not even that doing so is without value, but what matters more is what is in front of us. This is what Jin recognizes better than anybody else in this story, that people who need us right here, right now, take precedence over our need to make up for our mistakes, to seek vengeance or even justice for those who have wronged us, or to preserve the legacy of those who came before. He understands the true meaning of loyalty. The main theme of the game's story, after all, could be summed up by saying that loyalty to people is a higher good than loyalty to principles. Such a saying is itself a principle, but we don't really need to go into that right now. However, we should note that that is also the attitude adopted by Ryuzo, Jin's former friend turned rival who betrays him and joins the Mongols because they have food. No, seriously, there's a whole series of missions after you first meet Ryuzo where you try to find food for his band of Straw Hat Ronin who are running dangerously low on rations. This involves raiding multiple Mongol encampments and forts, none of which have food because they're all shipping it off to somewhere else, and I can't help but wonder what on earth the soldiers living in those places were using to sustain themselves. But whatever, I guess the Straw Hats failed to look under the Mongol saddles for horse jerky. Anyway, when Jin is in the process of storming Castle Canada to free his uncle, he finds Ryuzo there ahead of him.
The Khan put a bounty on the ghost. Anyone can claim it.
You wouldn't.
My men are starving, Jin.
Bro, just steal food? Sure, it wouldn't be honorable to take it forcibly from farmers and peasants, but surely that's less bad than joining the invading army, no? Anyway, Jin bests Ryuzo in a duel, which ends up with him barely scratching Ryuzo because that's how combat with ultra-sharp swords goes, and then makes him an offer.
Help me save our home.
It belongs to them now.
Okay, so ultimately Ryuzo chooses to side with the Mongols because he believes that is the surest path to survival, and yeah, we hear about how the Mongols fed his captured men to entice such a betrayal earlier on, but this wasn't a binary choice. Ryuzo could A, join Jin and Lord Shimura as part of their resistance, and likely sentence his men to die in honorable combat, B, join the Khan and maybe have a better chance of fewer of his men dying in battle, though that doesn't end up happening anyway, or C, just become a bunch of bandits, stealing food from whoever has it and simply surviving in the wilderness of Tsushima. If all he cares about is the lives of his men, why the hell doesn't he take option C? This betrayal would have been far more compelling if the game abandoned the food plot point entirely and crafted Ryuzo as a leader who feels he must choose a side in this war due to his sense of honor or duty, and who ultimately lands on the Mongols because they do legitimately seem like the safer choice. The Ryuzo we are presented with seems like he'd be totally fine sitting this one out if it meant his men could eat, and there were much safer ways to do that than throwing them into the middle of the conflict. But putting aside those issues, I do enjoy how Ryuzo's and Jin's commitment to their respective people conflict and contrast. Ryuzo is willing to pay any price if it ensures the safety of his men, which, again, it does not. But Jin does have lines he won't cross. And as I've said before, I would like him to approach those lines, to have his resolve tested more often. But such a test does occur at least once when Jin is taken captive super easily. Who is the Randu who managed to sneak up behind him? Anyway, the Khan has a proposal.
Convince your people to join me, and I will give them peace.
We will never serve you.
Jin, of course, says absolutely not, which leads to one of the most heartbreaking moments in the whole game.
If you kill him, you can go.
Run.
This is the price of war. Neither Jin nor Taka does anything wrong leading up to these events, aside from Taka acting rather foolishly by attempting to come and rescue the captured Jin, but we can hardly fault the guy for trying to be brave when he had spent his whole life running and hiding. Doing what is right, what is courageous, what is noble and just does not bring with it an assurance of a good outcome, but we do those things anyway, though the price we pay be our own lives. Taka died a hero. There better not be any Taka slander in my comment section. Anyway, Jin escapes by escaping, and then runs into Yuna, who managed to get every single Straw Hat and Mongol to leave the safety of their fort by burning a few bushes, I guess, and who then discovers her dead brother, insists they stay to bury him, leading to a final showdown with the Straw Hats.
That's the last of them. The Straw Hats are finished. Ryuzo's alone.
So much for keeping your men safe, Ryuzo. This leads to Yuna choosing to stay on Tsushima and join the battle for Castle Shimura, which we've already discussed. So now we can move on to the fallout of the decisions made during said battle. After Jin escapes aboard his reliable steed, Kage, and you've got to be kidding me, right after I play Red Dead Redemption 2, you're gonna do this to me again. After all that suffering, after finding out that the Mongols have discovered his poison and are using it against the local populace, after being cast off and denounced by his only remaining family member, one might wonder whether Jin has any regrets.
I made my own choices. Even knowing what they've cost me, I'd make them again.
Perhaps regrets is the wrong word. Certainly his falling out, to put it lightly, with his uncle is regrettable and tragic, but I appreciate that Jin is able to look back with a clear head, acknowledge what he has lost, and resolves to move forward anyway. That brings us to the poison story beat, about which I have already aired my complaints and will not do so again. All of that really is just set up for the final clash between Jin and Khoten Khan, the rematch that we have been waiting for since Jin got his ass thrown off a bridge way back in the beginning of the story. However, this is not a fight that Jin needs to take on. After all, the Khan is prepared to sail for the Japanese mainland, since the discovery of the poison has apparently replaced his need to recruit the people of Tsushima to his cause, which was becoming an increasingly impossible task anyway due to the fact that he is rapidly losing control over the island. Again, I don't know how Bro thinks he's gonna conquer all of Japan, but whatever. The fact remains that this is not Jin's fight if he doesn't want it to be, as pointed out by Yuna.
I can't lose you, Jin. After everything we've been through, everyone we've lost, I can't.
I have to stop the Khan.
No, you don't. We could find a boat, sail somewhere quiet, while your uncle fights his samurai war.
Do you really want that?
No.
If I fall, promise me you'll keep fighting.
You're a real bastard, Jin Sakai.
But of course, Jin doesn't run. What kind of a hero would he be if he left his people, even those not of his island, to the mercy of the Mongols? This is the tragedy of his story. He is compelled by his duty to give others a chance at peace and prosperity, gifts he will almost certainly never get to experience himself. Instead, he will fight. He will become whoever he needs to be in order to protect the people of Tsushima, but not alone. I do love that Jin trusts his uncle's loyalty to their island enough to send him a message asking Shimura to bring his army to attack the Khan, and that Shimura actually does so. As much as the Jito is the villain in this story, he is still a courageous and duty-bound man who leads from the front, except in that one instance when it would have gotten him killed and the story needed him to keep living. However, don't be fooled into thinking that this brief alliance means relations between uncle and nephew are suddenly repaired. That conflict is coming, but in the meantime we witness the Khan's death.
We will be remembered forever.
No, you will be forgotten.
Another reminder of why Jin's heroic deeds are nonetheless tragic.
My whole life, he was part of me. And now, I'm alone.
You're not alone. You have me.
A ghost. You belong to everyone.
And then, when Jin and Shimura are reunited, we hear of his continual commitment to his chosen path.
I sacrificed everything for my people. And I would do it again.
One such sacrifice, one casualty of Jin becoming the ghost was, of course, his honor. Or at least what he had believed honor to be. Which brings us to the all-important question when it comes to discussing the themes of this story. What is honor? One might say that honor is your good name. But what if you are well liked and respected by a bunch of depraved lowlifes and criminals? Do you still have honor then? On the contrary, if you, like Lord Shimura, act according to a strict code, even if it costs many lives and causes resentment and distrust among those whom you love and respect, do you still have honor? Is a man who does what is right because it is right but is hated for it by his fellows still an honorable man? Ultimately, honor, like tradition, like integrity, must be founded in moral truth if it is to be true. Respect won through less than truly good means is not true honor. Shimura's idea of honor is simple. Act according to the established code that demands samurai act in certain ways, in ways people expect the samurai to act. Why? Because that is how it has been done. Depart from those ways, and the consequences are fatal.
The Shogun has declared you a traitor.
He ordered you to kill me.
The ghost was an outlaw. He taught our people to defy their leaders.
To defend themselves.
With poison. A gift you gave to our enemy.
I had to stop you from throwing away our people's lives.
You have no honor.
And you are a slave to it.
The truth is, all of us are slaves to something.
Such is the tragedy of the human condition. We might not feel bound by our tradition, but there is doubtless one vice or another whose grip we cannot seem to escape. In that, we should see ourselves in Lord Shimura. This is what good stories do well. And while Ghost of Tsushima is far from perfect, it does an excellent job of presenting characters who are morally complex. Not morally gray, that's a nonsense term that doesn't actually exist. Moral complexity means that people make good choices, and they make bad choices. Sometimes they choose good things for the wrong reasons, and sometimes they choose bad things for the right reasons. Shimura's desire to stand as an example of openness and honesty for the people is good, but it led him to making choices that devalue human life, both of the soldiers under his command and then finally of his nephew, his would-be adopted son, the boy whom he raised and who, ultimately, is given the choice between Shimura's life and death.
Honor me with a warrior's death.
Remember forever ago when I expressed my wish that the game had let you make any meaningful choices, like whether or not you would exact samurai justice on those who had trespassed against the code and the law. Imagine if you had a choice to spare or kill the man who worked with the Mongols, or Tomoe, or Ryuzo. That would have made this choice feel less out of left field. Jim has taken the life of one non-combatant this entire story, and that was a dude who had been selling women to the Mongols. What sense would it make for him to kill his only living relative who now poses no threat to him? Of course I chose to spare Shimura.
I have no honor. But I will not kill my family.
The ghost will be hunted for the rest of his days.
I know.
Yes, Jin will be hunted, but that would be the case whether or not Shimura lives. Jin has sought his new path because it prevented needless death of those people whom he loves. Why deviate from that now? Unless you were willing to let the player make exceptions from Jin's new code throughout the story, giving him one now makes no sense. But putting that aside, this is a perfect way to wrap up the story. Jin is far from a paragon of virtue, but his journey is still a remarkable one. It reminds us that the way we do things, the way we have always done things, is worth questioning and examining to see if it aligns with what is and always has been true. Jin's refusal to back down despite facing overwhelming odds and hopeless battles shows us that there are worse things than death, ridicule, and dishonor, that neglecting to do our appointed duty and love in the way we are called to love is among the greatest failures we could make. Jin's struggle to know who he is and to become the heroes others believe him to be serves as a reminder that we are all called to greatness, and yet at the same time to humility. The side tales provide beautiful, if imperfect, narratives of self-control and temperance, letting us see how easy it is to lose ourselves in our pride, regret, anger, and despair. And of course, Jin's choice, time after time, to put people first, to protect those whom he has since birth been called to protect, no matter what it costs him, tells us once again that timeless truth. The person is a good toward which the only proper and adequate attitude is love. And if he holds on to that one single, most basic and foundational truth, then Jin Sakai truly is a man. An imperfect and pain-stricken one, but a man of honor nonetheless. Not all our heroes need to be Uncle Iroh or Aragorn. Sometimes they are messy, conflicted, and tragic. So are our lives. It's okay to admit that, but only if, like Jin, we resolve, no matter the odds or the consequences, to keep fighting.